of last year, many Americans have left their jobs in masses, an economic trend dubbed the Great Resignation. As someone who has definitely participated in this trend in 2022, I've been super eager to have this conversation about it from an astrological perspective. Hi, I'm Stacyann Forrester, astrologer and mentor, and I'm here with a very special guest, Aubrey the Clerk, career coach and astrologer.
Hey everyone, hey Stacyann, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here and have this conversation because I think it's been really helpful for me and for clients to have some astrological context for what's happening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining us. And just so folks know that, astrology is very complex. And although we're having this conversation about the Great Resignation, this global topic that is impacted by various astrological transits. For example, the Saturn-Uranus square definitely contributed and participated in what we're seeing occurring. I wanted to have this conversation, the context of your vantage point, Aubrey, of being a career coach and your focus on Chiron and Chiron's transit, and specifically how the Great Resignation has been influenced by Chiron's transit through Aries.
Yes, and I think that it's a good place for me to start is to talk a little bit about Chiron in general, and then Chiron and Aries specifically, and then talk about its connection to the Great Resignation. Does that sound okay?
That sounds great.
Okay, so when we think about Chiron in the chart, we're thinking about a place where we have a woundedness, a painful part of ourselves. And we're looking at this place not only to look at and understand that pain, to understand our own healing in the participation of that for ourselves, and then our contribution out to that in the world. And so for people that are really excited and interested in the myth, we can have a link below for a post by Jessica Davidson that I think does really well in describing the myth. But if we can just stay with that idea that there's two sides of this same coin, a woundedness and a giftedness, and that resides in our already existing wholeness. So this isn't some place where we're broken and we're going to fix it and move beyond it. It's part of accepting our vulnerability and our imperfections and our connection to ourselves that makes a greater connection to others. Mm-hmm. And this place in the chart is something that Adam Gainsbourg calls one of the most powerful catalysts for a radiant, joyful, and deeper connection to one's humanity.
Wow.
Yeah, right? It's like, that sounds pretty good. And I would add on to that, like not only our own humanity, but our humanity, our connection, our humanity of the humanity of others. So even this, just sitting here feeling goosebumpy about what's been going on in the last number of years. And so Chiron goes through all the signs by transit, just like every other point in the sky. And so Chiron went first into Aries in 2018. And it'll leave in 2027. So we have a good 9-year time frame here. And when we think about the things that have been going on and how we can participate and be connected to ourselves, I think that Chiron is a really good place to learn about that and be present with that and be present with ourselves in our work lives. Sound okay so far?
Yes, it does. And how are you, as a career astrologer, using Chiron specifically to support your clients?
Yeah, so we all have at some point, some sort of pain in relationship to our work lives. So that might be around finances. It might be around wanting to find our purpose and struggling with that. It might be being laid off or fired. There's a number of reasons why we experience difficulty and woundedness in our work lives. And there's oftentimes an opportunity in relating to that, instead of just moving on and trying to get closure quickly on that, is to spend a little bit of time understanding what's at play with Chiron in our chart, to say, is there some way that I'm getting in my own way? Is there some way that a shift in perspective would release me and free me and bring me more compassion for myself and open up more possibility. So when people say things like that, like maybe I feel trapped, right? Or I can't get what I need, or like that. There's this really strong, painful thing. I don't know about you, Stacyann, but when people are speaking, a lot of times they'll speak their chart, and there's a certain like tone of pain and frustration and stuckness that guides me to look at Chiron in the chart in the first place. Is that enough info?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I know exactly what it's almost as if the client embodies the archetype right in front of your face. As you look at the chart, you could definitely see the influence, see Chiron being expressed through their words and what they're currently experiencing and going through in terms of that pain point that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
So this brings us to the Great Resignation. And were we all experiencing this extreme sense of pain, frustration at work?
Well, I think when we think about my experience over the last couple of years, especially, is that most people are experiencing some sort, right? I'm not going to say everyone, because sometimes, working from home and being closer to family, I've talked to people and they're like, yeah, this is really working for me and I need to figure out how to extend this. And there's almost a bit of shame in the fact that change is really positive for them, because so many people are struggling. So I just want to acknowledge people who are in that position. For so many other people, right? Frontline workers, I mean, the pain, right? The witnessing of others' pain, the immense amount of stress in the face of something so uncertain and also so lethal, in the experience. And so there's people who are like, wow, I am here working by myself at home and I'm struggling even more than I was because I don't like what I'm doing. Or gosh, life is short and we're experiencing such as collective understanding in certain ways of that and a depth of that we haven't before, that there's a space of like, life is too short. What on earth am I doing here? What is really meaningful to me? And so when I start to, so I guess I just want to say there's a variety of experiences in the last couple of years. So that means that's a reflection of a variety of experiences that people are having around work. So when we talk about the Great Resignation, the thing that when I connect Chiron and Aries, so we're talking about Chiron, and then this idea of Chiron and Aries is it's around this continuum of independence and identity. And so things that can get brought up around it are very strong instinctual kinds of responses, fear, anger, and survival needs. And so when we think about the things, those three things to me have come up a lot for people in my conversations about work life, right? Well, I have this job that I don't like, but I'm afraid to quit because I need healthcare. And the way our system is set up, right? It can be, quite an extreme decision and a very difficult one to make. Or all of a sudden it's like, the anger, I don't like how I'm being treated, right? Either collectively by society about certain types of jobs, or by one's peers or management. And of course, I'm talking about this in, a sense of working for someone else, other than, being self-employed. But I think that when we think about this Chiron and Aries, is that it's a lot about boundaries. It's about what you do want, what you don't want, giving yourself permission, understanding your instinctive response, knowing it might be, and probably is going to be risks involved, whether that's risk about your own, that are connected to fears, or if these things about, oh my gosh, what are people going to think? What are people going to say? Right? Or I want to go out and do this amazing thing that's been in my heart. And what if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
I want to feel safer than that. And so that's that Chiron part that wants the safety, right? Which is important. And so this is what I mean by this isn't a leave Chiron behind and, jump over the cliff and do it. but it's this idea of how do we bring that part of ourselves. And so I think that what I see in the Great Resignation is this, a quote by Florida Scott Maxwell really says that for me, which is, you need only claim the events of your life to make yourself yours.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of, what does it look like to do that? Mm-hmm. And what does it look like to do that, to stand in one's own in a more neutral place, rather than, let's say, being angry at someone at work and being like, that's their fault and this, that, and the other, but I can't move because I'm stuck.
There's almost like a need to reclaim autonomy.
Yes. Yes.
And I know during this transit, Chiron did sextile Saturn. So this idea of like also taking responsibility for your life is also coming in there in terms of that experience of the transit. It's like, well, this big thing happened to us collectively, the pandemic. What are we going to, it's like choices opened up. You know, what do you really want out of life? How are you going to make the changes that you need to make to have the life that is more in alignment with who you are?
Yeah, and that it sits in a societal and cultural context for us in the U.S., especially, right? When we talk about this idea of, there's many things about the reasons why we ended up in this place collectively that we did, right? And so that when people talk about radical responsibility, you know, and I think about, it's like, and radical ownership, and then this idea of autonomy and stepping into it, I think that there's pieces of it that I look at it and I'm like, okay, yes, we don't want to be taking on ownership for things that are important from a capitalistic or collective perspective, right? But that there's this space inside of our lives that Chiron and Aries wants for us, in terms of that feeling of more calm, more centeredness, more wholeness, more embodiedness in ourselves as individuals. And that, to me, speaks about what you're saying about, like, that saying, what do I want? And when that can happen, you know, what choice do I want to make? And then that can happen with, I don't know how else to say it, but the edges smoothed off a little bit for our own selves, then we can move forward in a different way. And that ends up being like I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. When I look at it and say, this is my choice of the things that are within my scope of influence, right?
Right.
Then I can say, all right, so I can do this or not do this. So when people are like, I totally want to leave my job, I listen to that and I'm like, I don't assume that that's actually what they do or don't want when we're talking about Chiron. I mean, I know that the feeling is real and I have been there, right? Like, let me out. But then there's this notion of saying, well, let's stay with this for a minute and not judge whether this is, what I don't want people to get the idea of is it's this idea, and I'm not saying that you're saying that, but I think when people talk about this, it's like in the community, astrologically, it can be like, go for your dreams, risk everything, you know. And with a Chiron experience, Chiron really responds best to some gentleness, some acknowledgement that something's scary, some spaciousness around these ideas of the things that Chiron and Aries want us to do in terms of courage. So I was talking to one client, for example, and then I'm going to stop for a minute because I can get so excited. But I was talking to one client and she's like, I'm really considering leaving because I don't think I can do this. I think I'm going to fail in this position. And I was like, okay. And then we started talking about it. I'm like, and what she really wanted was to step up to the position. It wasn't her dream job. It wasn't something she was going to do forever. But for her own feeling of self-respect and confidence, she wanted to do more, be more present. So it's not a one size fits all. And some people will, as you know, take the leap.
Right.
It's just real personal.
It's very personal. Yeah. And I loved how you described that client of like, that situation of the thing that the client may say they want to do may not actually be it. And the need to kind of take a step back, because there is some, I find this with like Aries placements. And so I'm not sure if this is because it's Chiron in Aries or if this is just true of Chiron in general, but there is a bit of rashness of making decisions very quickly and maybe not so much thought through. And sometimes like when there is this like great passion to do something, I think it does need space, like you said. It does need some space. It does need some time to make sure that that is actually the best way to go for the result, the desired result.
Yes.
So absolutely, this kind of sense of like, yeah, I want to quit, but let's take a step back and say, okay, is that really what I want to do?
And is that, yes, and is that motivation coming from the wounded side or the gifted side, right?
Exactly,
because
where's
that
this coming from?
Yeah, or that we could say skillful or unskillful, right? Which we all have in every sign and every placement. And so it's that idea of like, okay, so am I coming from a skillful motivation in my instinct or an unskillful or a wounded or fear-based place, or more of a, no, this is what I really want and I'm excited about and I'm tired of telling myself I can't have it.
Yeah. For me personally, because I do think I was part of this trend. I did quit my full-time job earlier this year, but I made that decision last year. So it took a whole year for me to move towards that, because I knew this was coming from a skillful place. But I also knew I needed other structures in place before I could feel comfortable, you know, if that's a Chiron word, comfortable taking the leap.
Well, I think that, and that is such a great example, right? And so visceral and personal for you. And and that I would say about that comfort is really interesting, right? Because it's difficult to me in Chiron places, because when people are, you know, quote unquote comfortable in a wounded kind of place, it's still not comfortable, right? But it's more comfortable than at times than taking the risk. And so that's part of like this working with Chiron piece, which is it needs a little comfort in order to move forward.
Or the place that you were in is so uncomfortable.
Yes.
That the other option, even though it's going to be uncomfortable as well, it's less.
Right.
It's just a better option of the two. And, you know, I also want to share with the audience too that, you know, this Chiron transit has been also very personal for me, because I had Chiron moving over my moon during this time. So that idea of this comfort is definitely language of the moon. So it's kind of just really interesting to phrase it that way in terms of my personal experience with this transit. Yeah. The other place that I wanted to go with this conversation is, you know, as maybe you could help us define these words that we hear like get thrown around a lot. And, you know, if you have a way that you, in your practice, you distinguish between work, career, life purpose. I think we kind of always kind of lump those together, but I do think there are differences, and I'm curious to hear if you see them as different things.
I do see them as different things. And so I think about like work/job, right?
Right.
And something that we're doing, that we're earning a living, and it's what we go to. And, you know, it may be short term and it may be long term, right? And then career is like an overarching impact. And that doesn't mean that every job has to fit into career, right? but that there's kind of a theme going, and those themes can be role, they can be industry or sector, they could be a connection to the type of work or the way that you work, but that a career is has some connections between jobs, right, in one frame or another. And then purpose is something that feels very, it's a lot bigger. It's about who we are as a whole person. And it can be, lots of people have different ideas about what that means. Some people want to verbalize it. Some other people don't want to or need to. I think there's a lot of pressure put on purpose in our culture. And I think that my personal take on purpose is, our purpose is to show up and be who we are in this world. And we have a lot of barriers and a lot of complexity in our society to doing that. But I think everybody has their own idea of what their purpose is, right? Some people want to have a lightning bolt experience, and that's their purpose, and it never changes, and it supports them. And some people have that experience, but not everyone. So I think that when people come to me and they I'll give you an example of each. One person said, look, I want to through hike long trails like the Appalachian Trail and do that over and over again. And I want my job to support my doing that.
Yes.
That's a way of looking at how does work for someone, and that's a job, right? They're not interested in connecting an aim or a sector or any of those kinds of things together. And so, now their purpose may be something that's embedded in that work going on the trails. And so that's another topic, right? But that's a person that came to me and said, help me figure out the job situation for that. Another person might say, hey, I've had a total career in healthcare and now I want to shift out of it. Or like I'm talking to so people in healthcare, people in teaching right now, right? Or even retail or restaurant work, right? There's a lot of things that have been pretty hard hit in the last couple of years. And so people want to change their career. Like I've had a number of jobs in restaurant work and it's just too wearing for me anymore, right? It had its benefits and I was loving it and now I want to change. So that's a career change. And then there's people who come to me and say, I don't do a lot of work with people who are just help me find out my purpose, because I focus on work and career. But I think that when people say, I want my career job, one or both, right, to overlap with my purpose. And that's why I want to get clear on what that is and what my purpose's expression is through work. And we have that conversation. What might that look like? Now, some people don't want purpose or need purpose in their work. They need a job. They want money. It supports something else.
Yeah.
Other people can have a career that's satisfying without purpose, and other people really, really want it. But I'll say one last thing is that I think there's a lot of pressure on people to have a career that's purposeful. And I think it's individual choice or desire. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to bring in, like, when I hear clients come to me and they talk about their life purpose, I think there's just in them this desire for more meaning and more impact. I think that's what they're really yearning for when they talk about life purpose. It's like, it's that question to, like, why am I here? And they want something to fill that void. And I think for us here, in the culture that we're in, it tends to be tied to career. And I don't think that's ultimately true. I do think there's other ways to kind of answer that question, or other ways to find meaning and impact in life. It doesn't have to be tied to what you do for a living, what you make money at, or even your broader your lifetime overall career trajectory. So I think that's probably been like the issue, the search for meaning. And it seems like that meaning for, I guess, our like Western culture, it seems to be tied to that, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, which causes a lot of stress and strain and disappointment. And being pretty hard on oneself, I think, a lot of times.
And the identity that gets wrapped up in what you
Mm-hmm.
do for a living.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I do hope this period that we're going through normalizes that it's like okay to do work that supports something else, to do work that supports your life and other aspects of life. That it's okay to go to a job and just collect a paycheck, because a lot of people do that. And it doesn't have to be tied to who you are as a human being, and it doesn't have to be tied to this grander life purpose, meaning, and impact. That it's totally okay to have them separate.
Yes. Yes. And I love that, because it's this idea of, what does someone want to say yes to? What do they want to say no to? And does that come out of a place of their own personal experience about what's right for them, right? Yes, I want to work from home so I can be with my kids more. You know,
Mm-hmm.
no, I don't want to have all the pressure of having to make my work something that other people think it should be. I'm really good with how it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, I don't want to work that hard.
Yeah.
I don't want to work like that. To say that in like this kind of more capitalistic society where, we have a morality on work, like you've seen this during the Great Resignation, where there are a lot of people who were calling those who decide to quit their jobs as lazy. There's like more morality that's connected to work and working hard, and that whole grind culture. So it's totally okay if you don't want to work that hard.
Yeah. Yes. And to understand what working hard looks like for one person,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like there's the idea is that hopefully there's a freedom that's available on a greater scale.
Yes.
And that there's, just like you were talking about before, an
Yeah.
acceptance of that. Mm-hmm.
So I want to wrap up with one final question for you here, Aubrey.
Sure.
So we're going to be in this Chiron in Aries transit for plenty more years. So any tips for to continue navigating, whether it's our work, career, life purpose, any of the challenges that Chiron and Aries may bring as we continue through this transit through 2027?
Sure. Yeah, there's a few things. I think, just to reiterate from before, like being really gentle. And Virginia Bell talks about this as radical self-love, radical self-forgiveness, and radical self-acceptance. And I think that what makes it radical is that, how our society here in the States is structured. And so I think that that's part of it, which is like, and then some people say, like, if you were to respond to an animal that is in pain, how would you treat them, right? So it's like being super, super kind and gentle. And that Chiron is a place where, just like sometimes I'm like, you can talk to it, right? Say, okay, so I want to do this big thing. I know you need the safety in X, Y, or Z space, right? How can we do this? What do you need? I think also there's this idea of making sure that you've got support. And so, especially connected with Chiron, having a mentor, having someone to help guide you, somebody that doesn't necessarily have to have been through what you've been through, but understands you, that you can trust, and that you can bring your vulnerable self to. I think that helps a lot. I think that there's simultaneously then, and the last thing is that there's a balance between zooming in and understanding what the dynamics of our own Chiron placement is, and our own understanding and reaction to this Chiron and Aries transit for this span of 9 years. So there's importance in that depth of reflection, but at the same time, we don't want to get stuck in that.
Stuck. Yeah.
We want to remember. I want to remember. It can help to remember that these experiences that we're having, that sometimes I have a Buddhist practice, and so sometimes I'll say, right, like I'm suffering about this, I'm in pain about this is really bugging me, and this is in a misery loves company, but other people are in pain about this too, right? Yeah. I'm not alone, and so therefore, is there something that I'm learning that I can share? Is there some part of myself that I can go beyond myself and outside in a perspective and be like, okay, how can I take this into context and figure out how I can contribute, even if it's on a small level and not a pressure for a purpose level.
That's really great, Aubrey. I almost see those tips as a continuum of, that the first is, the gentleness to that challenge that you're navigating. And then reaching out for mentorship. And once you have mentorship and you've been able to kind of process what's been happening for you, finding a way to share it with others. So it's a very beautiful way of thinking about those three things. So thank you.
Connection.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Aubrey, for joining us. And where can folks reach out to you to learn more about you, your work, and how you can support them?
Yeah, people can find me at coachingforclarity.net, and that's for spelled out FOR.
Great.
Yeah, I love to hear from you if there's anything I can do to support you.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.